Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m, Wednesday, the 22nd of June, and you are watching episode 53 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, The Twilight Years and a Better Future, is my guest, Ian Henschke. Ian is the Chief Advocate for National Seniors Australia. He is committed to strengthening the collective voice of older Australians. Graduating from the University of Adelaide, Ian embarked on a career in the education section, but soon migrated to the media industry. Ian went on to be the inaugural ABC Reuters Foundation Cheverington Fellow at Oxford in 1999, where he negotiated a co-production between Four Corners and BBC World. In all, he has worked in film, television and radio and print for 37 years. Ian has served on the board of the ABC, presented regular radio programs, and has won the prestigious awards, including the United Nations Media Peace Prize in 2007 and 2009. Welcome, Ian.
Hello, Bill. It's great to be here.
Well, I hope you had a good day. Before we get too much into national seniors, can you give us a bit of a rundown on your misspent childhood and then you're sort of going through your bit of your work history before you came to the national seniors?
Well, it's taken me back in time, back to the last century. I was born in the middle of the last century, back in 1955, when we still made cars. I grew up in Adelaide, and obviously Adelaide was a thriving hub of manufacturing. So I grew up in a place called West Croydon, and that was down off the Port Road, and they used to build Holden motor cars, they used to build television sets, they used to build all sorts of things. Adelaide was a very industrialised town. I grew up on what they call the western suburbs, and then my grandfather, he died in 1961, and we moved to this house that I'm in now. You can see these old doors behind me if you're watching at home. It was built in 1915, and when Grandpa died, we moved in here, which is on the eastern side of town. And I was lucky enough then, because my dad worked for the State Bank, to go to a school on this side of town, and I got a pretty good education, and I was able to get into university with a teaching scholarship, and that was back in 1973. So that's nearly 50 years ago. And then I did some teaching in rural Australia. I went to Tennant Creek. I taught in the Riverland, which is where a lot of the orange juice comes from in Australia, comes from that area. Now they grow grapes, and in some of the hills towns up and behind Adelaide. And I did teach in the suburbs of Adelaide, but I couldn't get a permanent job back then. You might remember they brought lots of teachers in from overseas, from England and America. And so I ended up being one of those people doing contract jobs, going from town to town, place to place. And I got a bit sick of it, and I took all my money and I said, I'm going to go to America, because I thought I'll find my fortune in America, and I thought about this idea of starting a video shop, because I'd heard they had things called videos in America in 1979. And I thought, if I can get on the ground floor, it'll be a good thing to do. So I went to Hollywood. I went to America, and I actually went to Hollywood. And I remember going and seeing this guy who was from one of the big movie studios, and I managed to get a meeting with him. And he said, so you tell me that you've got no video stores over there? And I said, no, we've just started getting the machines, the machines that we can play the tapes in. And he said, oh, that's very interesting. Anyway, I'm pretty sure he's the guy that started Blockbuster or whatever. They
took your idea.
Well, back then, you think about it, there was no Crocodile Dundee. They used to compliment us on our when my name was Henschke and I was from Australia, he said, "Your English is very good." You know, I mean, I said, "I'm not from Austria. I'm from Australia." You know? So they didn't quite understand. And the Americans, you know, they took over that whole video thing. And now, where are we now? You know, in the 21st century, and nobody even watches VHS anymore. So if I had gone and done that, I probably would have lost all my money, because I probably would have opened 5 or 10 stores and then lost it all.
Well, if you're first and you got out first, you would have been fine.
Yeah.
It's like everything, it's timing.
That I probably would have stayed. Anyway, I got back, and the only thing that it taught me was to be interested in television. And so when I came back, I went to the Australian Film, Television and Radio School, which is based in Sydney. And I started doing courses there, courses in how to make radio programs. And because I thought it'd be easier to get into radio than it would be to TV. And then I managed to get a job with the ABC in their education section. And then I made programs for schools, and I was actually based in Brisbane. I got my first job in Brisbane. And for your regional people, you might remember they used to have a thing called the August train. The ABC used to take a train from Brisbane all the way up the coast to Cairns, and along the way they would stop and do, I think the first place we went to was, I can't think of it now, but anyways, Bundaberg, we went to Mackay, we went to Townsville, we went to Cairns, and the train would stop and the orchestra would get off and do a concert. And my job was to do the schools concert. So I was the presenter for the schools concerts. You used to have to settle the kids down and then we'd do a concert. So I saw a lot of Queensland, and I worked in Queensland for the schools programs. We did documentaries up there for schools. And I did a program called Behind the News, which is a news program for kids called BTN. And out of that, I got a job with 7:30 Report eventually. And from the 7:30 Report, I then worked in Four Corners. And then I got into radio again back in my later part of my career. And then when I was on radio one day, we had a group called National Seniors come in. And I interviewed them. I interviewed the CEO and the chairman. And afterwards, he said, "Do you want to come for drinks?" He said, "Your program's finished at 6 o'clock. Do you want to come for drinks?" So I said, "Oh, well, I might as well come and have a drink." And they had a special board meeting in Adelaide. And at that board meeting, he sort of sold it up to me and said, "You wouldn't be interested in working for us, would you? Because we've got a lot of campaigns we want to do." And he said, "Wouldn't you know someone that's interested?" And I rang a guy who lived in Brisbane, and I said, "Hey, there's a bloke looking for someone. Would you like to work for him?" And he said, "I only want to work part-time." I rang him back, and I said, "The fellow that I referred you to, he only wants to work part-time." He said, "What about you? Would you be interested in working?" So I said, "Yes." And that was 6 years ago. So so that's how I got to where I am today.
But you did miss out on something very important. In your trip to North Queensland, you actually brought something back.
What was that?
Your wife.
Oh, no, I didn't marry her. No, I didn't. No. I went out with a lovely lady from North Queensland. But
okay then.
I did not marry her. So in fact, but I'll tell you something that is interesting. When I was working for the 7:30 Report, I did actually interview my wife. And so we did meet across an interview. So it was an interesting experience. So when I eventually did get married, and I'm happily married now, 2 beautiful daughters, and I live in Adelaide. But National Seniors looks after seniors all over Australia. So my job is to help them get their message to government, federal government.
Okay, with National Seniors, like you live in Adelaide, but is there a sort of central office for it? No, like most lobbying groups have something in Canberra in particular.
Well, we've got
a sort of main body is that does the work, and you just and you can tell us a little bit of role about being the chief advocate versus like someone who's on the board or the chairman or whatever those sort of positions are.
Well, National Seniors began almost 50 years ago, and it began in Queensland. Now, you may have heard of the man who started National Seniors. His name is Everald Compton. Now, the name's probably familiar to some people in Queensland because he's written books about regional Australia. One of the books he wrote is The Man on the, I think it's The Man on the $20 Note. You know, it's about Flynn.
Henry Lawson.
No, Flynn.
Flynn. Yeah.
The man who started the Flying Doctor Service.
Flying Doctor Service.
Yeah.
I'll have to have a look at my notes, bank notes.
Well, you'd have to look at your bank notes. You obviously don't see too many of them, but
Not these days.
I'm pretty sure it's the $20 note. The Man on the $20 Note. The story of Flynn. Anyway, Everard Compton started National Seniors back in 1976. So we're coming up for the 50th birthday. And if people want to remember the number, if they want to join, I'll get a quick plug in now. 1300 76 50 50. 1300 76 50 50. Because back then, it was when you turned 50 that people started thinking about retirement issues and things like that. And it started in 1976. Anyway, Everard Compton, he's still going. He's 91, I think, and he still lives in Brisbane. For people that like a tipple, I believe he likes a single malt whiskey. So he has one a night, I think. You know, so I'm told.
Medicinal.
Yeah, medicinal purposes. He's very high up in the Uniting Church. I think he's an elder of the Uniting Church, and he started the organisation. And you might remember, if you're old enough to remember, back in the 70s, there was talk about bringing in some sort of I can't remember. It was some tax they were going to bring in, and I think Joe Bjelke-Petersen decided he was going to go against the tax, and he was going to.
That was the death tax.
Death tax or something, yeah. So a lot of people came to live in Queensland, and there were lots of retirees coming to Queensland, and so this organisation was there to give them a voice, effectively. And what we've done over those last 50 years is that we have a magazine, and that's the magazine there, the latest one, and it's called Our Generation, and this one is the election wrap up. So we're looking at what happened in the election, and then at the back of the magazine you get all the member deals. So if you become a member of National Seniors, you get 10% off a Village Roadshow pass, you get 10% off Amart furniture, you get 4% off Coles supermarket with a gift voucher, gift card. You get National Seniors travel insurance, which insures you up to the age of 90 something, I think, you know, because there's a lot of people who can't get travel insurance. Anyway, there's lots of benefits, but most people join National Seniors because they like getting the magazine once every quarter. So you get 4 magazines a year, and in it, you get told what is going on. You know, you get these other things like, you know, vouchers for wine and stuff. But the cover story in this one is about Val Dempsey. Now, Val Dempsey was the Senior Australian of the Year. And she ended up coming to us and saying she wanted to help us with a campaign that I've been running for the last couple of years, or we've been running, and that is Let the Pensioners Work. See, this lady is a nurse, and she says that if she works more than 1 day a week as a nurse, she loses 50 cents in the dollar from her pension, and she pays income tax. And so she spends a lot of her time doing volunteering, but she would like to do a couple of days work a week as a nurse. But she will get punished for that because we've got this very punitive pension system. And so that's one of the campaigns we've been running. We've been saying to both the last government and this new government, you've got to change the rules around the pension so that if somebody wants to work more than 1 day a week, just let them pay income tax and work. So that's sort of our big campaign. And so we've got that in the magazine, and we've also got, outsmarting the scammers. You know, you can learn about how you can not get scammed on the internet, because that's a big problem with seniors. And then we have general articles. But then what has been promised by the Labor government? You know, what are they going to do for seniors? So it's a handy magazine to have 4 times a year. It costs about $8 for us to produce one and send it out. So you basically get $30 odd worth of that, and the membership, if you buy a 3-year membership, is $33. So, you know, it's a pretty good deal. So that's my ad for the organisation.
That's fine, Ian. We'll also put your link on our website and along with the posted video. So
well, that's lovely. And look, I appreciate the fact that I'm able to talk to regional Australia, because one of the things that really worries me is that people that live in regional Australia don't get as good a deal as they should, because they are, in a sense, the backbone of the country, because they produce a lot of the wealth and a lot of the food and fibre and all of those things that people in the cities get. And yet they're not getting the sort of things they should get in terms of services. And part of the reason for that at the moment is because we've got this pension system that stops people like Valmay from working as a nurse. Now, you take a situation of, let's just pick a town, I don't know, Mareeba, you know, and let's just say there's 4 or 5 semi-retired or retired nurses living in Mareeba, men or women, because they all do nursing, and they've got a shortage. Now, if you said, let them work, keep the pension, just pay income tax, they might work 3 or 4 days a week. They might do the weekend shifts. They might do that. So the hospital would have enough staff so that they're not short-staffed. The aged care home would have enough staff so they're not short-staffed. The childcare centre would have enough people there. The disability, the people with disability would get enough carers. So it's interesting, when I've been looking at this policy, the biggest shortage of labour in Australia at the moment is regional Australia. It's a massive problem.
I think the other thing with regional Australia is too, we've also got an older population as a percentage. Basically, that's because the job opportunities, kids go away to, although there's local universities, there's still a lot of people going to university in Sydney, Melbourne, because they're more prestigious. And there's also greater job opportunities. So we tend to lose that youth factor. And I mean, if you talk, doing this show, I've rung different people up for interviews and a lot of people in Brisbane. And it turns out most of them originally come from Townsville or Cairns or somewhere, but they're now Professor so-and-so or Doctor so-and-so, but they live in Brisbane, and they're never likely to come back simply because the equivalent jobs are just not available here. So that's one factor.
That's very interesting, because Professor John McCallum, who is the CEO and head of research of National Seniors, he came from regional Queensland, and he's now the one in Canberra. You were asking before about where's National Seniors got its head office. Well, its research office and the CEO are based in Canberra. I work as chief advocate. I'm based in Adelaide. We used to have an office in Perth, but we haven't got one there anymore, but we've still got an office in Brisbane. And in Brisbane, because I said it was actually Everald Compton who originally started the National Seniors back in Queensland in 1976. So we've got an office in Brisbane. But, you know, these days with Zoom, like we're talking now, I mean, I don't have to get on a plane and fly to see you. We can sit here and talk, and I can show you the magazine, and we can talk. So we've got the modern technology there. But getting back to the point about labour, you know, you can do telehealth. You can have a doctor perhaps say, can you show me that, or do whatever. But you still need a nurse. You still need a carer. You still need someone to make the beds in the motel and serve the meals at the local hotel. You still need someone to fix the cars and the equipment that need fixing. Now, if you let pensioners work, then you'll have people working a little bit longer. But I'm not, what's happened when I've been talking about this policy, people keep saying to me, oh, but I want to retire. I don't want you to force me to work. I'm not saying I'm forcing you to work. I'm saying if you want to work, and we need the workers, and we desperately need the workers in regional Australia, then let them work and pay income tax. Now, this is not such a bizarre idea, because this happens in New Zealand. Now, I'll tell you a quick statistic. In New Zealand, 44% of people between 65 and 70 are still working. Now, New Zealand's a regionalised country. They need the workers. They need them in tourism. They need them in fruit picking. They need them in all these areas. They just say to the New Zealanders, here's your pension, go and get your job, pay your taxes. Simple, simple system. In Australia, we say, here's your pension. If you work more than 1 day a week, we're going to take 50 cents back off the pension. We're going to charge income tax as well. So you're going to lose $2 out of every $3 if you work more than 1 day a week. But if you work 1 day a week, we'll let you keep the whole lot without paying any tax. It's like getting a kiss and a slap. You get treated well 1 day and hit the next.
The other thing about the regions too is that we've got a naturally older population, but we've also got a lot of people leaving for the regions in their later years for lifestyle and things like that. So that also comes to the region. So we have a very high demand on services for seniors as a percentage of our population, and it's only going to grow. So I suppose people in the regions need your sort of advocacy to make sure their later years in life is well looked after.
Well, that's why I'm saying I cannot see what the problem with this policy is, because it works in New Zealand, right? New Zealand is a country that's highly regionalised. They need their own people to work longer and work more because there's a shortage of workers. One of the things that's curious about Australia at the moment is that we are going through what they call an ageing tsunami. If I look at our own family, my mum had 5 kids, 5 sons. I've got 2 daughters, right? So those 2 daughters have got, 5 uncles, and my cousins were the same. They had 5 in the family, 5 in the family. It was pretty standard for people to have 5 kids in the 50s, I even had some friends that came from families of 10, 11, 12. I shouldn't have to tell you my religion, but anyway, my dad was born a Lutheran but brought up a Catholic. But anyway, my grandmother was an Irish Catholic. But so you've got these big families, and then now you've got smaller families. So even though we've brought all the migration in, we still have to use our own resources, our own people. And that's why I'm saying there's no reason why someone can't continue to work into their late 60s, early 70s, even into their 80s. And I'll give you some examples of the people that are still working in Australia that are in that category. Everard Compton, I was telling you about before, he's 91. He's still very, very active. If you look at, that bloke you see on TV, Jerry Harvey, that runs all the stores. Well, he'd be well past retirement age. Ida Buttrose, the head of the ABC, I know she's 80. Kerry Stokes, he runs Channel 7, he'd be 80. Paul McCartney turned 80 the other day. David Attenborough's 96. The Queen's 96. Joe Biden, I think he's 79. I mean, there's no reason why a person can't still be, if they wish to, work into their 60s and 70s and even longer. So why should we have a mindset that says, okay, you've got to pension age, take your pension, but don't do too much work, otherwise we'll come after you. We'll come after your pension, we'll pinch it back, and then we'll make you feel like you're a bit of a criminal, because if you work too much, we'll come after you with robo-debt. Remember that robo-debt where they came after people? I'm saying make the system simple. What you do is we're saying to the new government, have an opt-in system. You go down to Centrelink and say, look, I don't want anything more to do with you. I'm going to opt out of the Centrelink system. I'm going to opt into the tax system. So when you opt into the tax system, your income tax will start once you get the threshold. Now, the tax-free threshold at the moment sits around $20,000. So once you earn above that, you'll just pay tax on it. So let's take that nurse that lives in that regional town. She wants to go and work at the local hospital. She's 66 and a half, she's on the pension. She hasn't got much superannuation, she's still a pensioner. She goes down to the local hospital and they say, we want you to work full time. We're desperate. We need you. We need you now. Heather, can you work? Can you start next week? So Heather starts next week. She works for a year. She earns $75,000 because she's working shift work as well. She gets a pension, $25,000. She gets her wages, $75,000. Let's do some maths on air now. You're never supposed to do maths on the radio or TV, but 75 plus 25 equals 100,000. How much tax does she pay on 100,000? About 25%. So she's going to pay $25,000 back. So has the government paid for her pension? Yes. Has she paid the taxes to pay it back? Yes. Who's won? The hospital gets a nurse. She gets $100,000 in a year. She pays $25,000 tax. She's got $75,000 left over. The employer pays 10% super, $7,500. She's got a bit more super. If she works for 10 years and tops up that super, she's going to have a better retirement. What happens when she's got more money living in regional Australia? She spends it. She goes and gets her teeth done. She goes and gets her hair done. She goes and buys a meal at the local cafe. So it stimulates the economy.
And the other thing, it just also improves people's worth, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's rather than sort of, well, now I've got to take this back seat to society sort of thing, whereas they can continue to participate, add value, and then when they do finally opt out, being in a much better position than sort of scrimping and saving from day to day.
And so, that's the other point I just want to make. Sorry to interrupt, but the other point I want to make is that I spoke to a professor the other day at the University of South Australia Business School, and he said that Australia's got a very odd system because if you look at the people that are not on the pension, have a guess how many of them work, because they just pay income tax because they've got too much assets and too much wealth. So that's why your Ida Buttroses, your Jerry Harveys, your Kerry Stokes, your Kerry Packers, if he was still around, they kept working because they just paid income tax. Well, some of them did. Kerry said you shouldn't pay too much income tax. Remember that? Remember Kerry said something like that? But the point of the matter is, they work at about 12 times the rate as pensioners do because they can keep their money when they earn it. So if you earn $100,000, you pay $25,000 in income tax. If you're a pensioner and you go out and you earn, and I'll give you an example, it's a real live person. Her name is Svetlana. She's 78 years of age, and Svetlana came to Australia from Germany when she was 58 years of age. She's got no superannuation. She rents her home in regional South Australia, and she works as a home care worker, going in and helping people, at home, people that are older than her. And she says, I love helping my old people. I love helping my old people. She's 78, right? Now, she is one of the best home care workers for this company called My Home Care Solution. So she gets $27.50 an hour, and she gets a bit extra because she gets a car allowance. But let's just say she's getting $30 an hour, just for the sake of the exercise. She works 30 hours a week. She makes $900 a week, right? Now, she loses 50 cents in the dollar from that past the first 200. So she's going to lose $350 of that money, right? So she's only going to be getting about a fraction. She's going to be getting about a third of what she's supposed to be paid. She's going to be getting about $10 an hour. Now, that's not fair. That's not fair because she is not wealthy. She is struggling. She has to look after, she said to me, she had to pay $300 a week rent. So if she's earning $300 a week, that's going to just go on the rent. So we've got to recognise that not everybody who's retired has got superannuation. In fact, I'll give you a figure and just think about this. 30% of women who reach retirement age have no super. 30% have no super. For men, it's 10%. So 90% of men have got super, but only 70% of women. Now, part of the reason for that is because women stop, have babies, they often care for their friends, relatives, whatever. they're out of the workforce. So they haven't got that superannuation to fall back on. So that's why I'm saying this is actually a good policy to try and help a lot of women who are poor and have come to the end of their lives, working lives. And you basically say to them, look, if you want to keep working, pay income tax, live a bit better.
I think the other thing is, because they're not extravagantly wealthy or anything, and it sort of just helps them make ends meet much better and gives them a bit of buffer in that, it's the money they do earn, they actually need to spend, like you say, the hairdressers and just those things.
Yeah.
Whereas when we had COVID, I got really cranky with the government giving the unemployed doubling their income. And sort of, it would have been better to give it to double the income of the pensioners for that period, because they would spend it within the community pretty quick. Whereas up here in Cairns, we're quite aware that the young people getting this benefit, all of a sudden they had this extra 750 and the buying of drugs went through the roof. So it wasn't returned to the good economy. A lot of that was
it would have gone to the black economy, you know, what they call the black economy in Australia. And the drug problem in Australia is a massive one, absolutely massive problem all over Australia, not just regional Australia, but I've heard that, you know, the methamphetamine, they call it a scourge, you know, that's a dreadful problem. But it is a huge problem. But if we focus on the positives, though, there is an opportunity for government to do something here which would actually be a win for the economy, a win for the pensioner, and a win for business. And I think we should recognise that not all policies that come in, you know, are going to be easy to get across the line. This one is a hard one. But I did actually have a meeting today with a couple of business operators. They were backing it. I met the head of the Hotels Association in South Australia, and he told me that there are more than 100,000 vacancies in the hospitality industry across Australia. Do you know how many jobs are actually going in Australia at the moment that are actually
I think someone was saying the other night there's up to 400,000 vacancies.
It's more than 400,000. It was 395,000 in November. Now the figures that came through in February were 423,000, and they reckon that the rate has gone up like that. If it continues at that rate, it may be 450 when the figures will come out this week probably, or in next week, because they have the June figures, the February figures, the November figures. But the steady growth has been like that. Now, I was watching telly back when the budget was on. They were up in Queensland, North Queensland, and they were talking to hotel and motel operators up there who said they couldn't rent rooms because they just didn't have the staff. You know, just didn't have the staff. So people are being turned away from holidays. People are being turned away from all sorts of things, cafes. You know, they just don't have the staff.
I think that's got to be an ongoing problem for a while. We aren't going to see the return of an international workforce for some time. Yep. And then it will be sort of, I think, very ad hoc sort of situation. But if we could move on to another one of your policies that you're trying to get over the line, and this is the downsizing of houses to help people sort of and the housing stock, because it's quite incredible. We've just had a couple of years of COVID. We've effectively stopped migration. Where we used to have 200,000 people coming in each year. Obviously needing housing, accommodation and all those sort of things. And you would think that would have taken the pressure off, but then we get to the situation we're at today, and like Cairns in particular at the moment, I think vacancies rates are less than 0.5%, and you just, even if you wanted to have a worker here, there's no way they can find accommodation. So it's really got to be a big problem. And one of your policies sort of is aimed at helping alleviate some of that housing shortage if it can get up.
Well, one of the problems we've got in Australia is that a lot of people actually buy another house. They might have one or two houses or three houses, and half the time they haven't got anybody in them. I mean, when I went to Brisbane for the first time a few years ago with this job, I remember coming in from the airport, driving in through Brisbane, and there were these big tower blocks that had been built, big tower blocks. And they would have been 10, 12 stories high. And there was only a few lights on. And I said to the taxi driver, I said, are they all working late? I said, there doesn't look like there's anybody in those buildings. And he said, yep. He said, they're buying them off the plan, foreign investors from overseas. They buy them off the plan. They don't even live in them. They just buy them as investments, like buying shares. You know, they just buy them, keep them for 3 or 4 years. They might sell them. They may not sell them. They just hang on to them. As, you know, that's a bigger issue, but I don't think any government's going to tackle that one. That's the negative gearing and capital gains tax issue, which the Labor Party tried to tackle the election before last, and to their shock and horror,
burnt severely.
They were burnt severely. But what we're saying is that, okay, let's have a look at the people that are in houses at the moment that are unsuitable, because you might find that you could have a person that's living in a traditional Queenslander, you know, where they've got lots of steps up the back and lots of steps down the other side. Now, it may be unsafe for them if they're, you know, they could be developing Parkinson's, they could have had a stroke, they could have knee and hip joint problems, and they're struggling around in this unsuitable house. Now, if you build what they call a silver standard or even a gold standard house, where you've got the ability to get a walker in, you've got the right size bathroom doorways, the right size shower recess, you've got handrails next to the toilet, and so you can get up off the toilet. Although they're called silver and gold standard accessibility houses. Now, if you're able to build one of those and you give an incentive to the person to move into it, then they might leave that big house, which would be suitable for a family, and move into the more accessible house. Now, that is an opportunity there for government to just give it a little bit of a nudge. Now, some of the governments are doing it. They've actually got stamp duty policies where they don't charge stamp duty on the sale. So if the person downsizes, they don't have the sale. The federal government, by the way, has made it possible that if you do downsize and you have some money left over, you can put that into superannuation, no matter what your age is. So you can top up your super, even if you're past that age, because at the moment, you can't top up your super past 75. So you can actually do that. So there's some opportunities there. But we also say that if a person wants to downsize and they want to stay in their own home rather than go into an aged care home, they should be able to have the money that they make from that downsizing and put that towards the cost of their care. They might want to buy a few hours of extra care at home in addition to their home care package. So you move into a more suitable housing. You are then less likely to go into aged care. The government gives you some incentive for doing it, and you free up a home.
And I think that's very important at the moment in regards to there is a lot of households where, you know, everyone's heard of empty nest, but it even gets more exaggerated as people get older, because they actually lose their partners and things like that. And now you have a person alone, which is not really a great idea, really. I mean, people really need social animals. They need good company and that. There should be incentives to sort of ensure that, you know, even they could take in borders and not be adversely affected, or relations or things like that. But there's a whole gambit of possibilities you could look at to ensure that no one is actually living at home. I mean, it's rather horrendous sometimes when you hear about someone's passed away and they're not found for weeks and after. I mean, I think that's one thing society should really look at as we go forward, to ensure we don't have this situation where people are left alone in accommodation and sort of basically forgotten.
Well, can I tell you about a regional South Australian scheme, which might be of interest to people in Queensland, because I know that it could be replicated up there. There's a town outside of Adelaide. It's about an hour and a bit's drive from Adelaide, so it's inner regional, if you want to call it that. And they've got an aged care home, which is not really an aged care home. Now, stick with me on this one. It looks like a motel. You drive down a side street off the main road, and then it says Warner Close, and it looks like one of those not gated places, but you go in through the thing. There's no gate on it, but you drive in there, and then built around an area, maybe 25 units around, and then in the middle is a central area, and that central area is where a couple lives, and they provide an evening meal every night in a centralised dining room. If you want to go there, you can go there and eat the meal. And they deliver breakfast to people in the morning. If people want to have breakfast, they actually, like a motel, they go around and drop the breakfast off. So you're living in a unit, 1 bedroom unit. Some of them are 2 bedroom, so that they can have someone come and stay. They're guaranteed of their tenancy. So these are for people that don't own their own home. They can stay there. The laundry is done by the central unit, and it's working out very well. So getting back to your idea about people being social, so you've got all these people living in effectively like a small village of 25 to 50 people, depending on how many people are in the homes, if they're couples or singles. Then they can come together of an evening, have a meal together, go back to their rooms, talk to each other. They've got a little garden area. So it's almost like a small little village there. And I think that's the sort of model that we should be looking at, rather than, I mean, some retirement villages, you've got to pay a lot of money to go into them, or people find out that they don't own the unit. When they go to a retirement village, it's not owned. And so therefore they feel that we've had a lot of complaints about retirement villages from time to time where people have gone in thinking that they own the unit, but they don't. You buy a lease in some cases. You don't actually own the retirement village. So I think there's opportunities to come up with different ways of living, not necessarily. And I like your idea of having other people come in and live in together. They do that in Holland, for example. They actually have a scheme where students come and live with older people.
I think the other thing is too security. I mean, I don't know what your crime level is in Adelaide, but ours is pretty horrific. And it seems to be a continuing problem. And older people living alone, or without that sort of daily contact and a surety that they've got people around who are sort of interested in looking after their well-being, are living in dread. So I think that's another factor that can work into it and make sure in this sort of community environment you just talked about, that their security can be looked at in regards to making sure someone's responsible for all the doors and locks and all those sort of features, and also just have an overview. Like you're saying, there's a centralised area that could also house a monitoring system for cameras and things like that to add extra security, which is so important these days for older people.
Well, I mean, it's one of the things that we put to the Royal Commission into Aged Care, by the way. We said that there should be cameras in all aged care homes, because we actually think, and when we did a survey on it, we found that more than 90% of people supported it. And yet most aged care homes don't have cameras.
Well, I think there's probably a lot of things going. I mean, I sort of dread, I was fortunate with my parents. They really didn't they sort of lived to a certain age, and then they sort of didn't have that long duration or any duration in aged care. But I always sort of dread the idea of them, being in some aged cares that you're not 100% sure of the quality of life that they're sustaining, and especially sort of after dark and when there's no sort of visitors and that. So, I mean, we've heard some pretty terrible instances of sexual assault, robbery and things like that within the aged care system as well. So you really want a widest group of people as possible to be interacting with each individual to make sure their well-being is being looked after.
And that's why I think we've got to recognise that we're going through a very different period of time in history, because if you look at the number of people that are going to be over a certain age and how that's going to grow, it's going to grow until we get to 2050. That's when the ageing, what would you call it? The ageing, tsunami, they keep talking about it, will then start to change. But because all those people had the baby boomers in the 50s, like anyone that's born between 1945 and 65 is a baby boomer, or 46 to 66 is a baby boomer. So the youngest of the baby boomers at the moment is 56, and the oldest of the baby boomers is 76. So when you start to need care is in your late 70s, early 80s. So that first of that group is coming through. Now, do you know how many of them there are? 5.8 million baby boomers. 5.8 million. So, we're going to have a lot of people who are going to need a lot of care in their last few years. Most people don't need care. It's only, like you were saying about your mum and dad, it's probably only the last 6 months, sometimes up to 3 years, but in that zone. And what we should be doing is looking at ways to make sure that people are active and connected. And it's important that we do that.
I was just thinking there about the millennials and how they get all upset with the baby boomers taking all the money and leaving them with all this debt. Well, wait for another 10, 15 years. You'll be really paying for us.
Well, I don't think it has to be that way, because I tell you what, Bill, if we do change this system, which is what we're talking about, and I get back to my let the pensioners work, you will end up with having that group of people paying tax for an extra 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And you know what? They'll be paying for their own welfare. I'll tell you this very quick story. There was a woman called Susan Ryan. Now, you might remember her. She was the first female minister in the Whitlam government. Not the Whitlam government. She was
she was a senator.
She was a senator. It might have been Whitlam or the Hawke government, but probably both. She probably translated between the two, but she was worried about this problem, and she said, I want to get a report done. So she got a report done by Access Economics. Now, there's an economist called Chris Richardson, and he said if you could increase the number of older people in the workforce by just 5%, you would add $48 billion to the gross domestic product of Australia. Now, in the last election, Jim Chalmers and Josh Frydenberg were having a bit of a standoff at the press club, and I like to watch those things. And Frydenberg saying to Chalmers, your lot, you can't handle money, you're no good, or whatever, and then Chalmers is going back to Frydenberg and says, well, you are taxing at the rate of 23.9% of GDP. You're at a higher rate than we were when we were last in office. And then he said, oh, that's because we've got COVID. Anyway, I heard this and I thought, hang on a minute, 23.9% of GDP. Let's just call it a quarter. Roughly a quarter of the gross domestic product of Australia goes in tax. I had a look, and we are number 38 in the world of the OECD countries when it comes to being taxed. They're down with Turkey. So Australians think they pay a lot of tax. They don't pay a lot of tax. But, GST in this country is 10%. It's much higher in other countries, So anyway.
It's on
Sorry?
And it's on everything in a lot of countries.
Yeah, a lot of countries. So we're not highly taxed, but just take that figure. 24% of the country's wealth goes in tax. When Susan Ryan commissioned this report back in 2012 about getting older people to work longer if they wish to, she said that it would add $48 billion. The report said it would add $48 billion to GDP if you got 5% extra working. Go back to that number. About a quarter of that money will go in tax. So you will increase the tax take of Australia by $12 billion a year, $1 billion a month, extra tax to government if you just get 5% more older Australians staying in the workforce for longer. 5%. 5%. Now, when we did a study the other day, National Seniors, we asked our members what they would do. 60% of them said they're quite happy retired. You know, they just want to go and catch barramundi, drive in the caravan, you know, do whatever they want to do, stay at home, prune the roses, smell the roses, whatever. That's fine. But we found that 20% of them said that they would like to work, and another 20% were interested in working. You know, so you've got that sort of group. I'll take you back to New Zealand. Remember that figure I said in New Zealand? 44% of New Zealanders are still working between 65 and 70. Australians are not that different. So if we decide to do that and we change society so that happens, you will get $1 billion a month extra taxation to the government because those people will work. So you will have a lot more money flowing through the system, and you'll have that money which can pay for better aged care. It can pay for better health care. It can pay for all those things that the government says that the oldies are going to cost, because the oldies will be paying for their own care.
And the other thing, it adds to the consumer economy instantly. That's the big thing about people who aren't, you know, getting in big buckets of money and then going to Europe, sort of thing.
Yeah.
These are the people who are going to spend it on, they're going to spend it on a daily basis, you know, right. Getting a coffee,
saving up for a lettuce, you know.
Saving up for a lettuce. That's if you can find one.
Yeah, saving up for a cauliflower, you know. I mean, I'm talking to you from Adelaide, and someone told me the other day they paid $10 for a cauliflower because someone was saying, oh, that lettuces were $8 or $10, and someone said, oh, cauliflowers are $10, you know. So, but I mean, but you're absolutely right. If we let this policy of let the pensioners work come into being, and the government actually gets it across the line, and we manage to get it into place, then you're going to have groups of people that will actually spend money within their own communities, and that'll help their own communities. And I go back to New Zealand. You know, I looked, you can do this after the show if you want to, but they've just had the kiwi harvest, you know, the kiwi fruit harvest.
Yeah.
And they've got signs over there saying, seniors, come and work now, you know, kiwi fruit ready to pick. And I've never seen kiwi fruit growing. So I looked on the ad, and the kiwi fruit actually hang down in front of you, almost at eye level. They grow them on a trellis, right? So you put a thing around your chest like this, like a big apron, and they just walk along picking them in front of them, and they get paid $27 an hour, $27.50 an hour or something. So, you know, why wouldn't people go and do that for, say, 2 or 3 days a week? You know, they go up to this Hawke's Bay area, I think it was, and they start picking the kiwi fruit. So then they get that, then the kiwi fruit goes into the packets, they get sent over to Australia. So New Zealand, which doesn't have a lot of resources, it doesn't have a lot of minerals, it doesn't have what does New Zealand do? It sells product, it sells tourism. So they use their own people, their own seniors are a resource. They don't see seniors as a liability, they see seniors as an asset.
I think that would also help regional Queensland, because our fruit picking season, you know, would depend on Pacific Islanders or backpackers or whatever. But if you did have a local workforce, like if you talk about the tablelands, you've got big centres of Mareeba and Atherton. You've got probably a lot of older people there who are on the pension and that. But you could, if you set it up and have proper incentives, they could be your seasonal fruit picking.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to let you know a little secret. I bet you there's a lot of them that are getting black economy at the moment, where a lot of people are saying they're so desperate. They'll say, look, come down here, do a day's work, I'll give you $200, right? Right? I bet you there's a lot of black economy. So what will happen is, if you bring this in, you can say to the primary producer, get rid of the black money, let's play by the rules. You pay your tax, you pay your wages, you do it properly, right? And then you'd have a better system all round, because you don't really want the black economy to thrive in Australia. It's not a good way to run a country.
No, well, it's an insidious thing as well.
Yeah,
I think it deprives everyone of a fair taxing, and as that robs infrastructure and services from the people.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, Bill, because, you know, my wife, she comes from Italy, and she told me that in Italy, they, if you go and buy a cup of coffee, they always give you a receipt. And I said, why are they always giving me a receipt? She said, because there's probably someone sitting across the road watching that cafe, right? And they can walk in and say, I want to look at the till. I want to see what is, because they were dodging the money. You know, they're dodging the taxes, right? So if you, and you know, you don't really want cafes where you've got a pensioner working, you know, 4 hours in the morning and they're getting paid you know, $100 or something like that. So I just take it out of the till, you know, no one will know. Well, why not do it the right way? Do it the right way. And you were talking about the drug economy before. There's a lot of black money in the drug economy, and there's a lot of black money in the tradesman economy. There's a lot of black money in the regional economy where people are being paid cash in hand. We want to stamp that out. We want to get rid of that.
And I think that all bodes well for the government, the tax system, and delivery of services, which we need. I mean, that economy under thing is never going to generate the services older people need in healthcare and things like that if the money's not directed to the government to push it in that direction.
Yeah, look. The ideal system is that you have your own people working. And I'll tell you something about the backpackers, and I'm not decrying them. I'm just going to tell you a fact. If a backpacker comes to Australia and they say they want to travel around the country and they want to work, do you know what their rate of tax is?
I think there's less than 15%, isn't it?
15%, yeah. Right? So the backpacker comes to Australia, they can earn, I think it's $40,000, right? They pay 15% tax on it. And then the employer pays superannuation. So the employer will pay them $4,000 on that $40,000. And then when they've had their holiday, bye-bye, off they go. So they take the $4,000 of super, they leave the country, they don't spend the money here, and they've gone. Now, is that really, I mean, okay, that's fine if you've got the people, but if you've got a labour shortage like we've got at the moment, why not have the pensioner, they get their $18,000 tax-free threshold, then they earn their $40,000, right? So that means they get 58, they pay tax on that. So the government gets more tax than they would off the 15 cents. The superannuation they get paid goes into their super account, which gives them a better retirement. They probably pay a Medicare levy, which means they give a bit more back into the health system. And then they spend the money in the local community. So, you know, so when you go and look at those New Zealanders picking the kiwi fruit, I mean, I bet you they've got backpackers and pensioners picking the kiwi fruit. That's what we want. We want to have two lots. And if they're out there both. Yeah.
Well, the one thing about the backpackers, the thing is, they'll never take the job of pensioners, or in like my sister runs a turf laying business, and a lot of that was the backpackers were the thing. I don't think you're going to have too many pensioners fighting over to drop 2.5 metre rolls of turf on the ground on a daily basis. So there's a niche for both. Yeah. So it's not like we necessarily denying one group access to work. There's just a variety of work that some are better suited for than others, and they can both enjoy for those backpackers coming to Australia, seeing it, getting a bit of work to subsidise their holiday a bit, and maybe go home with a few extra bucks as well. So it's not they're not dynamically in opposition. They actually can be a benefit to the whole economy.
Well, that's right. So I mean, I've got my fingers crossed. New government, open to new ideas. You know, that's what I'm hoping.
Okay, then we've just gone over the hour. I'd just like you to sort of wind up with in regards to any other sort of policies or lobbying or advocacies you're going to push over the next 12 months or so, a little bit different from the two topics we've been talking to?
One of the big issues that's around at the moment is electricity prices, and we're getting a lot of people very upset about the cost of power and what's happening there. And I think that we need to be thinking about the future and how we can ensure that people don't have power bills that are so high. Now, there may be ways that governments can help in this area. And one of them is the idea of creating clean energy bonds. If the government wants to move, which they say they're going to do, to reducing the emissions that are created from all of the ways that they generate power at the moment, why not let old Australians invest in clean energy bonds? And we've said that there is so much money that's sitting in virtually low interest or no interest bank accounts. I think the figure's over $100 billion is sitting in low or no interest bank accounts at the moment. People are getting something like 0.1% for the savings account, and they're getting, they might be lucky if they get 1%, maybe 1.5. National Seniors went out the other day, and we went to a bank, and we've got our own member account. If you're a National Seniors member, you can get 2.1% on 11 months. Now that's still not keeping up with inflation, but it's actually, at least you're guaranteed of something there in your bank account. Now, if the government said they were going to issue clean energy bonds, they could then take that money and put it into those projects that they keep talking about. The regional batteries. I mean, you think about Queensland, it's called the Sunshine State. So if you had batteries that was able to store the energy, or you could even let people have batteries in their homes, because I know there are some people now that are putting batteries in their homes. So the solar system works during the day, goes into the battery. Then if you've got the equipment on at night, you're drawing out of that. We've got to start thinking about, if we're moving to this new transition from coal-fired, gas-fired energy into the newer energy, it's going to require batteries. So one of the things we're going to be looking at is how can we make sure that people don't end up paying huge bills. I mean, I'm hearing people telling me at the moment that the energy companies are coming to them from July the 1st and saying, there's your new bill. Some people are going to have to pay $1,000 extra a year. That's a lot of money if you're a pensioner, $1,000 extra a year. So there's got to be a new way of thinking about that.
I think probably another opportunity for those low earnings on pensioners' savings. Well, we've got a broke government that's billions and billions of dollars in debt. Maybe that they could get favourable conditions where people with pensioners who have got a few $1,000 can lend it to the government, say maybe at 2 or 3%, because as we go forward, I'm sure the federal government's going to be hit with bigger interest rate bills.
Yeah, they may well. And look, if you go back and look in history, during the Second World War, they issued war bonds. During the Snowy Mountain scheme, they issued infrastructure bonds. If they want to do things in regional Queensland, they could issue bonds that people could invest, and at least be guaranteed that they were a government-backed investment, because too many people get caught by scams. There was what was the one called Storm, wasn't it? Storm financial scandal.
Yeah, well, that was a storm.
Yeah, where people were lured to put their money into dodgy projects. So I think there's an opportunity there for government to look at the money that seniors have got in their bank accounts and say, could we use that money to build up infrastructure projects or clean energy projects or whatever, and give them a little bit more or almost the same as they get in the bank, because I think a lot of seniors do want to help the next generation by, investing in those sorts of things.
Okay, then we'll wrap it up there. I'd really like to thank you for your time tonight. It's really appreciated. If you could just stay on the line for
Can
a
I
couple
tell
of
you
minutes.
one last thing?
Yep.
Yeah. There may be some people out there at the moment who are not pensioners, and we've spent a lot of time talking about pensioners. So I'd like to just finish by saying that there are people who have got enough income or assets so that they don't get the pension. Now, they're called self-funded retirees. National Seniors also looks after them as a lobbying group, as an advocacy group. And the deeming rates, in other words, what they get deemed to be earning from their superannuation and what they get deemed to be earning from their investments, has now been lowered down to 2.25% for anything above $53,600, and at 0.25% for amounts $53,600 or less. Now that means that there are people out there who can, in fact, get a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. You may not be eligible for a pension, but you could well be eligible for a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. Now, the rules around that were changed in the run-up to the election. So I would urge people, go to the National Seniors website and have a look at the concessions calculator. The concessions calculator is there so that you can see whether you are eligible or not for a concession and what the concession is. There's another group that we work in partnership with called Retirement Essentials, and they actually can do the paperwork for you if you want to pay them, or you can go to Centrelink and do it yourself. But the point of the matter is, if you're struggling and you're on a pension, make sure you know what you're entitled to. If you're struggling and you're a self-funded retiree and you're saying, look, you know, I wish I could get a bit of help from somewhere, look at the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card and see whether you're eligible for it or not. And you might be surprised. We found that 48,000 people in 1 month went to our website just recently to have a look at what you're eligible for. For example, in Queensland, if you've got certain concession cards, you can get lower rates of registration. You can get lower rates on your driver's license. If you get a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, you can be eligible for government dental schemes. You go to the chemist and the prescription. I went down to get a prescription tonight. He said $65 because I'm still working, right? If I was a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card holder, that prescription would be $6.80. So I would have saved $50 in one prescription. Do you see what I mean? There are things that you can do, but you need to know what you are eligible for. So if you go to the Commonwealth Seniors, if you look up Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, National Seniors, look at that, and then look at our concessions calculator. And the other thing is, if you're not a pensioner or semi-retired or someone who's over the pension age, look at National Seniors anyway, because once you get to 50, 55, you've got to start thinking about where you're headed. And we've got another section on there called Money Hub, which has got information on it. And we're having a seminar coming up about retirement, and we're going to have Noel Whittaker. Have you heard of Noel Whittaker?
Not offhand, no.
Well, he's written books called Retirement, all the things you need to know. So we have online seminars that are free. You just go online, you can watch them, and you can learn about learn about the things that you need to know. I mean, I'll finish with a funny story. I was working at the ABC, and when I decided to go and work for National Seniors, I was about 65, and I worked with a fellow, and he said to me, well, if you're going, I'm out of here now as well. I said, oh, really? Okay, all right. And he said, all right. Anyway, he left, and then he came and saw me about a month later, and he said, you know what? He said, I couldn't get a pension. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, they told me they'd put the pension age up to 65 and a half. And I said, Robbie, you know, didn't you know before you left what the pension age was? Now, a lot of people think the pension age is 65. It's now 66 and a half, and it will go to 67 next year. So you actually have to know the rules. And if you don't know the rules, you can make some big mistakes.
And the other thing is, knowledge is power. So the better you get yourself informed, it's not as though you're trying to gander the system as that. It's just making your life easier because it's there to use, find out about it, and your website, we will put it up on our Facebook page. And people recommend to go to it and find out what you're entitled to and how national seniors can help you.
Now, Bill, has anyone ever told you before that you look a bit like Richard Gere? Maybe it's just the screen.
No, it's probably the fuzzy video.
Is it? You know the actor Richard Gere?
Yeah. No, never been complimented on my looks at all.
No, he's going grey, and I think he leaves his hair grey. He doesn't put a colour through it. Yeah.
No. I mean, I think that makes people look older when they have dead black hair and the age about him. You think, well, what happened to him? He aged prematurely or something.
Yeah, I said to a friend of mine the other day who was Greek, I said, are you using Grecian 2000? Because he had black hair and he's the same age as me. And he said, no. And I said, oh, good. Because I said, if you do use Grecian 2000, it makes you look like a 2,000-year-old Greek. Yeah.
Okay, look, we'll wrap it up there. And thanks very much for your time. But stay on the line for a sec. If you've enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share and subscribe to our Facebook channel, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, join me. I'll have Richard Norris from Townsville Enterprises Limited, and we'll talk about their success in achieving projects for their region, and maybe sort of rub Kansas' nose in it in regards to why they're struggling a bit, can't even get a decent football ground. So join me next week for that episode. Thank you and good night.